Hyvää päivää everyone, and welcome to a Hearts of Iron 4 Dev Diary. Today we're going to be covering the alternative history for Finland, so that's going to be going across the fasc, the democratic, and the communist paths. Oh, and there may be a few tidbits at the end to cover, but we'll get to that when we come to it. Let's jump right in. So the Dev Diary begins by giving us a full perspective of the focus tree, so why don't we just go have a look at it. It's interesting that this is the full Finnish focus tree when it doesn't show the shared focus tree branch. I wonder if that only pops up after you've started a faction. But regardless, we can see here we have the communist and the democratic paths, which are kind of joined into a single tree with a shared unit in the middle. Here is of course the Finnish neutrality, which is the historical path, and on the right we've got our right-wing policies, or the fasc path. And I think that is exactly where we begin. So you start off traditionally with right-wing policies, which is the focus to give you your advisor to start boosting party popularity. After that you get to choose. You can either discredit the democratic system, where you slowly tick up your fasc party popularity, and then take the focus below it to change the regime peacefully. This is the slower method, but it avoids a civil war. Or if you prefer a faster method, you're a busy person with things to do, then you've got prepare a military coup. And that is of course your civil war path. In taking the civil war path, you'll also gain access to the coup preparations decisions, as we can see here, including appealing to the middle class to maybe get them on your side. But I do wonder if you can still use the old exploit of deleting basically every single one of your divisions and then just spawning one wholesome horse and then having some fun crossing Finland. Whether you chose the peaceful method or you chose the horsey method, eventually you're going to end up with this gamer. I think he's called Vilho Anala, and he is one of the sort of founding main members of the Lapua movement. Take note here, of course, that in addition to being an economic reformer with the consumer goods factories factor and law cost reduction, nations will have personal agendas. So depending on your leader, the agenda will shift the balance of power between a strong and weak nation, depending on whether you can fulfill the conditions. In his case, it's basically having a strong army and making sure that fasc is the predominant party popularity in your country. Moving down the focus tree, now that you've got your country where you want it, the rightmost sub-branch is going to be about changing the internal affairs of your country. So that's predominantly going to be stuff to do with the balance of power and maybe some stuff to do with industry and army. They do take note though that you should pay attention to the focus called Musta Paidat, I think it's called there. This will give you access to the Patriots People's Movement, or the Black Shirts, and they should be a new form of militia unit that you can take advantage of. So the militia units are not going away after one DLC. Moving to the bottom of the focus tree branch, you'll find Intellectual Elite, which gives you a 5th research slot, and also National Fanaticism. Here you'll find some good buffs across the board. Bear in mind the recruitable population, always important. That's like one of the main things my eyes immediately set to. The template cap of those militia we saw earlier is increased to 24, but to take a note at what happens to the leader trait buff, economic reformer becomes architect of Finnish corporatism, giving you +1 max factories in a state. So this is effectively giving every state you own another place to build a factory, but it doesn't actually apply it to the state, it applies it to you. So I wonder if this means that every state you conquer going forward also gets this buff. TLDR, he's a pretty decent leader in that context. Pursuing a more far-right version of government will mean that seeking some German protection is far more likely to succeed, and in doing so you can take this focus where they will guarantee you, and you'll basically give them military access, docking rights, a non-aggression pact, but also give them some resources. The final thing to talk about is what can you do in your exterior politics. So the choices come down to two main things. You can either join the Axis, where the Axis itself will try to buff up your country, whether that's with Italy or Germany, or you can go it alone with Finnish supremacy in the north. Taking a more independent Finnish path means you can take the focus Finnish irredentism. This has multiple effects, including giving you claims in Kola and East Karelia in case you want a war with the Soviets, making it easier to take their things in peace conferences, and also giving you a set of decisions for the Last Kinship War. The Last Kinship War decision will allow you to start basically an independence war in Karelia against the Soviet Union, with them suddenly rising up in places such as the state listed here. The process isn't so simple as just clicking the decision and a nation appears out of thin air, but building up some anti-Soviet sentiment. Once that's done, you'll have to start funding it with some weaponry, some political power and some command power to instigate a new Karelian uprising, and hopefully once that's all gone to plan, they should appear and spring into life. Once they do uprise, you do have the option whether you want to join them in their uprising, or if you kind of just wanted to mess around with the Soviets and cause them some issue. Note that of course Karelia is pretty weak, so if you are going to do this, maybe wait until the Germans have pushed all the way into the Soviet Union and you can sandwich some Soviet troops between Karelia and the Germans. Next we have an absolutely fantastic looking Karelia, the Karelia Finnic Unitary State, I think that says, in which you can see a very bearded looking man as the leader of the Fash Nation. The dev diary takes time to note that if the Soviet Union finds itself in a civil war following their focus tree branch, you might notice how nations spring up when that happens. If Karelia is one of the nations to spring up, then the decisions for you to help them will also appear in this context, so it's an overlap with no step back. And the final focus in the branch to talk about is Keepers of the North. So this is basically your final great supremacy focus, where you annex every subject, you demand the territory of every ally, and you claim every state that is neither an ally or a puppet for conquest. The end goal, of course, is to form the greatest of Finland's Greater Finland, which is effectively the Nordic Union, and would look something like this. Note how they own the Baltics, as well as all of the traditional Nordic states. With that branch done, let's head over to the left-hand side of the focus tree and talk about communism, and first and foremost, social democracy. So this focus tree branch is basically the communist and the democratic branch is a little bit mixed. In the case of the red government, you've got a civil war, and in social democracy, you've got no civil war. Similar to what we saw with the right side branch, the left side branch with, is that Somalian socialism? Let's just say the socialism focus is going to give you the original advisors you need for either communist support or democracy support. After that, you have to decide which form of socialism you want to go for. If you're choosing the more democratic side, you might want to go with this particular person, is it Milna here, who interestingly unlocks a decision to gather funds for women's shelters. I really do like the idea that advisors just unlock decisions for you. I feel like that could be retroactively added to so many other parts of the game. Once you've found yourself with enough support gathered through decisions or through the advisors that we saw, you can take the focus pragmatic socialism, which requires you to have 60% democratic support. After that, the rest of the branch is basically focused on making sure you've got good balance of power support, giving you further ideology, and unlocking advisors with the shared historical branch. The dev diary only makes note of the last focuses, which give you some factories, resources, and consumer goods, so there is some economic benefits to going democratic, but nothing shattering. Next up, we get to see the democratic Finnish leader, and let's bite the bullet, he doesn't appear to be the strongest in the game, with weak war support, and giving you some party popularity stability modifier, but is stability really what we're looking for when we've got the Soviet Union coming after us? The answer is probably not, so let's go look at the communist side of the focus tree and see if they've got some better solutions. So similar to what we saw with the democratic side, the communist side also comes with advisors with decisions, in this case preparing construction workers' actions and aligning the trade unions. We actually get to see a good chunk of the path to socialism decisions here, stuff like cracking down on the military, purchasing Soviet equipment, and infiltrating Soviet commandos into Finland. This has the nice buff of giving you 3 divisions with some decent brigades in them, to be honest. 2 artillery, 6 infantry. I mean, that's nothing to be scoffed at, inside your capital when the civil war begins. But I guess that is the elephant in the room. To go communist, you have to have a civil war. I do see no point in this dev diary where you can avoid it. Once the preparations are set, the second Finnish Civil War focus will begin your civil war. After that, the dev diary shows how as you progress through, you're going to see the militia divisions that we saw earlier implemented in a different form for you to actually be able to win the civil war, until eventually you can hopefully win it and start heading down into the normal communist focus tree branch. Interestingly, they've made it so that this focus tree branch gives you some operatives, although I haven't actually heard too much about agencies and operations in this DLC, so I'm not sure if there's any like unique mechanics that will come with it. Alright, let's see what the communist leader's looking like. So this is him. I don't know how to say his name, presumably Imo, but most likely I'm wrong. And he's going to give you some max volunteer force divisions, okay, if you're using volunteers. Ideology drift defense, which isn't too useful if you're really, as a player, it's not too big of a deal. And agency upgrade time. So agencies are appearing again, but again, I'm not sure in what context you use them. Interesting. If he wasn't to your liking, however, though, you can take the focus to Red Watch, which unlocks a decision to appoint this guy instead. Why can't anybody have a pronounceable name? He's a veteran communist, giving you minor stability in factory output, so not actually that powerful, to be honest. But he does want to completely obliterate European fash, so, maybe he's not the worst person in the world, hard to say. And surprisingly, there is a third option for the leader of Finland. If you find yourself allied or puppeted by the Soviet Union, then there is a Stalinist puppet leader for you to take in the form of Otto, who might actually have one of the better buffs. So construction speed is up by 10%, and you get some subversive activities cost -50, which is actually a decent amount. I guess the downside is that you're going to be giving consumer goods and supply to the Soviet Union. Nobody wants to be Stalin's puppet. Alright, have you picked your poison? Did you pick the Democrats with the slow transition and the weak leader, or did you pick the communists with their civil war and potential puppetry and operatives? Regardless of which side you went down, there is still the elephant in the room, or I guess the elephant to the southeast, if you will, the Soviet Union. So the options before you are approaching the Soviets, hopefully to form some kind of Finno-Soviet pact, where you can establish like a non-aggression pact with them and they won't attack you, or antagonizing the Soviets, where you know full well they're coming after you and you want to beat them. Choosing to approach the Soviet Union will eventually allow you to unlock the decision to request the extradition of Mr. Manor. Let's just say Mr. Manor, who unfortunately is going to die of tuberculosis. It's a hell of a thing. But if you choose to save him, he actually gives you decent buffs to building civilian factories. Although, if you're one of those players who only builds mills, maybe not as useful to you, but +5 war support is +5 war support. On the flip side, if you think the Soviet Union is cringe and Stalin is weird champ, then you can focus on antagonizing the Soviets, eventually allowing you to form a trade agreement with the Western powers. So in this case, it's going to be getting some fighters from the United Kingdom, light tanks from France, and very importantly, towed artillery from Sweden. It's kind of cut off at the bottom as well, but you also get infiltrated assets, which actually gives you really good buffs, including, very sneakily hidden away there, +1 operative slot. And if I know anything about agencies in HOI, the amount of operatives you have is so crucial to your success. Those guys just get captured like nobody's business. It's ridiculous. It may, however, be the case that you did decide to work alongside the Soviets and eventually became their puppet. That's okay. That's okay. You later realise that the Soviet Union is cringe and Stalin is weird champ. In that case, you can work towards Finnish autonomy to hopefully break away a little bit from being the Soviets' puppet and stuck under their thumb, and eventually get rid of Otto, who is just giving them all of your consumer goods. So moving on, you may remember how on the right side of the focus tree there was Greater Finland, which the Axis and non-aligned version of Finland will be able to take advantage of. Well, the communists don't really buy into all that, but they do like Red Finland. Red Finland, as shown here, is actually red. It is a Red Finland. It doesn't lie, but it has the nicer buffs of giving you some cores, resistance bonus, militia cap, and interestingly improving the traits of the leaders that we saw earlier. To my mind, none of them really stand out too much to me. The buffs to the first guy continue to feel a little bit weak, but I guess they're fine. The devoted communist giving more factory output with some compliance game is possibly the best in context, possibly, But at the end of the day, once you get to the bottom, you'll find Otto, who seems to have completely reformed himself and has gotten rid of giving away consumer goods and now gives 2% recruitable population. I feel like Otto in the late game could be the best guy. For those of you on the democratic side that maybe feel like they're being a little bit left out, you do have some focuses to help your side. So there's approaching major democracies. This will allow you to, well, I guess as it implies, allow you to ally yourself up with the Brits and the French. Below that, we have two focuses: proclaim the Grand Finnish Federation, giving you cause. I'm actually surprised how many Finnish focuses in this focus tree give you cause, even in the democratic side. And also socialist welfare, which is the focus we can see here. So this gives you more consumer goods factories factor reduction, very good. 15% compliance in every controlled state. Well, democratic Finland doesn't appear to be a war-going state, but maybe if you find yourself starving off the Soviets, then eventually you're going to be taking some of their control. And in addition, the leader gets a champion of national cooperation. There's the recruitable population, there's the war support, better traits, better leader. So hopefully the democratic has some late game resurgence. Unfortunately, there is never always just positives, and if you do choose to go down this path, Finland will become this weird murky green-grey colour. So yeah, there's always a downside, I'm afraid. You're just going to have to swallow it. Okay, so the final thing to talk about in this section is how you've got joining the Allies, you've got joining the Soviets, but there still remains the forming your own faction path with the Northern Defence Front. The most important part of this central path is at the bottom there is the Confederated Finno-Russian Republics, which is unique in that it actually allows you to start integrating several semi-autonomous republics into Finland's greater sphere. So as we can see here, which this is possibly one of the more powerful things I've definitely seen with Finland, the top focus will give every core state of the Soviet Union that is controlled by you as Finland gains daily compliance gain plus 0.25. So that's already very important. But in addition to that, you'll also unlock a series of decisions allowing you to core those Russian states. I don't think it's all of Russia, but it seems to be a decent chunk of them. As we can see here, most importantly, good old Leningrad has St. Petersburg seems to be coreable. So this entire section of land is now open for taking, in addition to forming the traditional Nordic unity. So this could be one of the strongest sort of united Nordic nations. In an effort to not keep you here too long, there were some additional changes that were made to Finland that aren't necessarily to do with the focus tree. So in this example, we can see that the White Death has been added as kind of a series of events that will pop up in the game. Here's the news event we can see for the White Death as it eventually arrives into Finland. In short, if you are playing as the Soviets or somebody who thinks they're going to be able to take on Finland, you should be pretty careful about dealing with those snipers hidden in the snow. They are going to mess with you. In addition to that, the Continuation War has also had some rework in a sense, in the fact that we can see there have been changes to the Armistice with Moscow. So I think previously it was a pop-up event for Finland in the kind of way it works, but now Finland has a specific decision very clearly laid out. If the conditions are met, they can have a white peace with Finland if they give them Karjala, Sala and is that Petsamo, in addition to tons of equipment. So it's definitely a pretty weak situation for Finland, but there is more control that you have over it. Of course, that might not be the end of it, because there may be some requests by the Soviet Union for you to kick all the Germans out. And if you agree, which you're probably going to be forced to do, there's going to be hectic sort of Germans evacuating the country. It's going to horribly affect Germany, maybe add to them kind of losing their war, but also maybe they'll want to attack you for it. So if you're playing on alt history, just be a little bit careful of that. The Dev Diary takes note that during By Blood alone, Italy had the ability to change state names depending on stuff it controls, such as Zara being Zadar when it's not under Italian control and such, and in a similar fashion, Soviet states and Finnish states and Swedish states, quote unquote, are all going to be able to change their names depending on who controls them. Now, again, I'm not at all going to be able to pronounce any of this, Finnish is just one of those languages which I can never tell if it's really easy or really difficult to pronounce. But the long and short of it is Murmansk can see some changes, as well as southwest and western Finland, which in history was owned by like large Swedish communities. So there'll be some switches if Sweden manages to annex Finland. Maybe they're going for one of those great Swedish conquests. Next up we have a topic dear and close to my heart, my kokoro. It is warmed by this topic. So we have releasables, and new game rules. So the Nordics can now be fragmented. The two options are having the, is it Sápmi? I really should have googled how to pronounce that word. That's a pretty important word. But the Sápmi have the ability to be released, but you can also fragment the entire Nordics, allowing for Greenland, Iceland, Karelia, all to become independent at the game start. This is big news, of course, because Greenland was a country that I long wondered if it was going to get its own independent nation, and spoiler alert, there it is. Unfortunately, there is no news on a German fragmentation status. My heart continues to bleed. I'm so disappointed that we still don't have a German releasable kingdoms that you get with the French focus tree as a starting situation. Oh, not to mention an East and West Germany starting situation. I feel like we're massively missing out with that. Never mind. For every cloud though, there is a silver lining, and that is that the Sápmi releasable nation has actually got a significant amount of attention being brought to it. So usually it always gets a flag, but it actually has some portraits for the leader. In this case, we've actually got a council, which is really interesting. They've got like a really cool looking council leader trait icon. They also, very strangely, have admirals and generals, and their entire government cabinet also has got portraits. Wow. I mean, this is some serious work. I wonder who's going to play as this nation. Like, do they have like a formable nation which allows them to find the content? Who's to say? And finally, we're going to wrap up this dev diary by taking a look at changes from the Finnish dev diary. So in this case, we've got Parmi's Devils as seen here, which will actually allow you to get a penal division. Very interesting. I'm fascinated that the prison divisions are actually seeing the light of day again. In addition, we also get to see what some of the new art looks like, which isn't something I usually spend time looking at because to each their own, but this we have to look at. Look at this. It's a reindeer. That is a reindeer. He's a wholesome little reindeer, and he's got a backpack on because he's delivering supplies. Look at him. He's so trendy. Aww. Alright, and on that wholesome reindeer note, I think it's time we end this dev diary. So, what are our thoughts? In my mind, I'm thinking this looks like a solidly decent tree because it doesn't have too much crazy stuff going on with it. It's kind of like you choose your ideology, you work your way down, your industry is to the side, your army stuff is to the side. It doesn't stray into the ridiculousness too much. I think some people might be upset that there's no, let's say, monarchist or royalist path, but you know, you have to just accept Finland isn't a monarchist country. I don't think it's ever been a monarchist country. There might have been some like ideas for it to become monarchist in like the Russian Empire, but there's nothing there, so no monarchy. On recollection, it does make me think now that it's possible Sweden is the flagship country of this DLC. It was something I was thinking about during Sweden, which of the two nations will appear as like the bigger of the two. I think Sweden is the flagship nation. Alright, so with that, I think we've come to the end. Next week's Dev Diary, they say we'll be talking about military industrial organizations, which is a feature we've heard little bits about here and there. I'll be interested to show what more they have to show about it. And remember, start of October is the release date of Arms Against Tyranny, so not too far away. I'll see you then, we'll make videos about it then, we'll cover more Dev Diaries. If you like this video, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. I like the reindeers. I think they're very wholesome. Bye.